Welcome to Mr. Jan Reacts a Ting and Ting and Ting. And today we're going into the second episode of the history of the Uyghurs. I hope I pronounced that right. To ting, you know what I mean? Let's YouTubers simmer and see what's going on with the Uyghur people in the second episode. The Dragon Historian, Sean Kim.
Hello, and welcome back to the history of the Uyghurs. In the last video, we discussed how the Uyghurs, who were Buddhist and Manichaean nomads in Mongolia, ended up as Sunni Muslims in the Tarim Basin. We ended with the beginning of the rule of the Chagatai Khanate in the region. However, before we pick back up, I want to backtrack a bit and discuss the importance of the Kara Khanates, who we only briefly mentioned in the last video. The Kara Khanate was a Sunni Islamic state in Central Asia founded by the Karluks, whom you may recall as one of the Uyghurs' allies in their fight against the Gwek Turks. When absorbed into the Mongol Empire, the Kara Khanate had a massive role in shaping the identity of the Chagatai Khanate, and therefore today's Uyghurs. The dominance of Sunni Islam is the most obvious connection. The modern Uyghur language descends from Chagatai, which itself comes from Karluk, which was spoken by the Kara Khanates. But, as we also mentioned in the last video, this intermixing of cultures led to the disappearance of the name Uyghur from contemporary histories for quite some time. We do know that when the Chagatai Khanate split in the mid-14th century, the Uyghurs remained with the Mongol-ruled eastern portion known as Mogulistan. In the 16th century, the Uyghurs became part of the Yarkand Khanate, destroyed by the Zungars in 1705. The Zungars were Tibetan Buddhist Mongols from western Mongolia. After 1717, they even controlled Tibet. The Uyghurs were enslaved by the Zungars and treated very cruelly. So it was no surprise that the Uyghurs often helped the Chinese Qing dynasty in its efforts to conquer the Zungars. The Zungar Khanate fell in 1755. For the next 3 years, the Chinese government committed the Zungar genocide, killing more than 500,000 Zungars. This was roughly 80% of the Zungar population, and they never recovered. Following the genocide, the Uyghurs became by far the dominant ethnic group in Xinjiang, especially the Tarim Basin. The Qing dynasty allowed the existence of the Kumul Khanate, a semi-autonomous region for Uyghurs. Xinjiang province had not yet gained that name. The north of Xinjiang was called the Zungar region or Zungaria, while the Tarim Basin came to be known as the Muslim frontier. The Uyghurs themselves continued to be called Turks, Turkey, Musliman, Chanto, meaning turban head, Taranchi, meaning farmer, and pretty much anything except Uyghur. Arguably, a modern Uyghur identity had not even been formed yet. They were sometimes lumped in with the Hui, the other major Muslim group within China, though they are now considered separate. The Hui were the main force behind the First Dungan Revolt, which ravaged western China in the 1860s and 70s. The Qing dynasty nearly lost control of Xinjiang to the revolt. Yaqub Beg, an adventurer of Uzbek or Tajik descent, established himself as the leader of the revolt and proclaimed himself Emir of Kashgar.
You know, there's a pattern in history here that I've noticed watching all of these videos, is that when separate groups come together in one area and somebody wants to find a kingdom, a nation, a country or whatever, they decide to use religion to get everybody under the same umbrella, for lack of a better term. And what I'm saying is this: it would be easier to control a population if they all believe the same thing. And one of the easiest things to convert people to is something supernatural, which religion takes that place. You know what I mean? So then you'll see where there's, like in Africa, for instance, when the slaves were brought here to this part of the world, and I'm not even talking about the slaves, I'm just talking about the politics of the whole thing here. When they came here, one of the first things they do is just separate them from different tribes, because different tribes have different dialects and they couldn't communicate. But also their religion, their religious beliefs were demonized, and then they were Christianized. So if you get all the people thinking in one deity, then it's easier to control them. And in a way, I think that's what happened to a lot of people of African descent in this part of the world. They were all converted to Christianity. Now, who's Whose religion is that? The colonizers that brought them here, that's their religion. So if you get them to think like you, it's easier to control them. And unfortunately, that's the politics infiltrating spiritual beliefs, or politricksters using people's religious beliefs to control them. Because it's not just the slaves that's going to get controlled, it's the poorer class of people who were colonizers themselves or descendants of colonizers themselves who will be controlled over that big umbrella of one religion. And it seemed to work like a charm. It seems to work like a charm. Let's get back to this video here.
Both Britain and Russia, who were competing for influence in Central Asia at this time, recognized the Emirate of Kashgar. However, it seems religion was not enough to unify the various peoples populating Xinjiang. It is not clear what sort of role the Uyghurs played in the Dungan Revolt, but they were not the most active supporters of the Emirate. In 1877, the Qing dynasty defeated Yakubeg and soon drove out the Russians, who had occupied the north of Xinjiang. In 1884, the region was made into a province and officially given the name of Xinjiang, which means New Frontier. This name is considered insulting by many modern-day Uyghur nationalists who prefer the terms East Turkestan or Uyghurstan. In 1912, the Qing dynasty was overthrown by the Xinhai Revolution, and China soon plunged into the chaos of the warlord era. Xinjiang came under the control of the Xinjiang clique. As both Mongolia and Tibet broke away from China in the midst of this chaos, the Uyghurs, now starting to form a distinct modern identity, sought independence as well. During a 1921 Soviet-sponsored conference held in Tashkent, the non-nomadic Turkic Muslims of Xinjiang were renamed the Uyghurs. They traced their ancestry back to the old Uyghur Khaganate and, while acknowledging the differences between themselves and the old Uyghurs, took their name. The Soviet Union took advantage of Uyghur nationalism to push their own interests in Xinjiang. In 1930, China abolished the Kumal Khanate, sparking a major Uyghur rebellion, and the Soviets quickly intervened. There were three major players in the war, which lasted until 1934. The Uyghurs, who sought independence, the Soviet Union and the Xinjiang clique, who were allies, and the Chinese nationalist government, who wanted to secure stronger control over Xinjiang. In 1933, the Uyghurs established the Islamic Republic of East Turkestan, with the capital at Kashgar. This became the first Uyghur attempt at independence. Despite being an Islamic republic, East Turkestan ensured religious freedom. It also nationalized major industries and all underground resources. In 1934, East Turkestan was destroyed by the other two parties. The Soviets emerged victorious, securing a satellite in the Xinjiang clique under the leadership of Chiang Kai. The Chinese, hoping to regain control of Xinjiang, were quick to use the Uyghurs as their political pawns. In 1937, the Chinese government supported a Uyghur uprising against Soviet-controlled Xinjiang. However, the rebellion was unsuccessful and only resulted in the strengthening of Soviet power in the province. In 1941, Chiang Kai betrayed the Soviets and pledged loyalty to China. This time, the Soviets used the Uyghurs as pawns to regain Xinjiang. In 1944, the Soviets sponsored the Ili Rebellion, during which the Uyghurs were able to establish the Republic of East Turkestan. The republic was based in Dzungaria and was a Soviet satellite.
One caveat, I guess, to the last statement that I made earlier in the video. Yeah, religion is used. Sometimes it doesn't work. Brute force is another way of doing it. Of course, you see it in history all the time. Now, check this out, man. You see how the different political sides or ideologies just switch sides. Oh, I'm with the Uyghurs now, and oh, the Uyghurs are giving me trouble, so I'm gonna go on the other side and help them, and go back and forth. You know, I don't understand how anybody in their right mind would think that anybody is going to be loyal to you by siding with them. And you see that going on with the two major Muslim fractions compared with this country. Oh, we're on this side now. Oh, well, that side with that other country. So, you know, I'm going to go to that side now and, you know, fight against that. And they just keep going back and forth, back and forth. But but nobody wins. If you don't stay on one side and stay with that side forever and ever, nobody wins. So is it about ideology or is it more about economy? Or is it just simply wanting power? But then nobody gets power because you keep jumping from side to side. You may have some power for a little bit, but then there's another uprising coming, and the people that you are siding with are going to be more vicious towards you because they feel like they were betrayed. But then human beings are so confusing. They're so confusing. It's like you hated me 10 years ago, but now you're on my side, so I'll fight with you. And then 5 years down the road, oh, no, I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't get it. Let's get back to the video.
Chinese nationalists tried to regain this territory, but a ceasefire in 1946 seemingly secured the republic's continued existence. By 1949, though, it was clear that the communists were going to defeat the nationalists in the Chinese Civil War. This meant that, from the perspective of the Soviets, East Turkestan had outlived its purpose. East Turkestan was absorbed into Communist China by the end of the year. Beijing then encouraged Chinese migration into Xinjiang. In 1953, Xinjiang was 75% Uyghur and 6% Han. By the late 90s, Xinjiang's population was 40% Han Chinese and only 45% Uyghur. Dzungaria and the provincial capital of Urumqi have become majority Han, while the Uyghurs still dominate the Tarim Basin. China suppressed and still suppresses Uyghur religion and culture, which has galvanized the separatist movement to continue. The Uyghurs are also at an economic disadvantage compared to the Han Chinese, exacerbating the tension between the two ethnic groups. The tension reached a breaking point in summer of 2009. In late June, Uyghur factory workers in Shaoguan, Guangdong province were falsely accused of sexually assaulting a Han Chinese woman. 2 Uyghurs were killed by Han vigilantes and more than 100 were injured. This led to a peaceful protest in Urumqi on July 5th that quickly turned into a violent confrontation with police. The demonstration soon unraveled into a race riot during which nearly 200 people, mostly Han Chinese, ended up dead. Following this crisis, the conflict in Xinjiang quickly escalated. Knife-wielding assailants and suicide bombers have appeared in the name of East Turkestani independence. In 2017, Beijing began to take more extreme measures to control the ongoing conflict. It has increased surveillance in the province and set up so-called vocational education and training centers, in which 10% of all Uyghurs are estimated to be confined. But we'll discuss this topic in more detail in an upcoming video. So that ends my overview of the
things we do to each other, huh? Because we're different physically, of a different race, a different religion, a different nationality. We just seem to emphasize the differences. And then we have leaders taking advantage of those differences, pitting us against each other, while the leaders get rich and those who are fighting stay poor, but they're fighting anyway. I guess if you're not living nice and you're not rich, the next adrenaline rush, if it's not money, must be violence against those different from you. Because even here you see that poor people, like, oh, I know this is, and this is what causes a lot of conflicts. Like yesterday I saw 2 different altercations in the parking lot to where I work, and it was both of them was a black person against a white person. First one, they wanted to throw punches. Luckily, they took it off the parking lot at work. Nobody got thrown the punches. Then next thing I know, 2 cars pull up against each other, and a black man is in his Jeep, and a white man is in a gold-colored car, and they were screaming at each other. Black guy drove off, went to the parking lot. White guy went down to the other end, pulled out a gun. Got a gun out. Over what? But I tell these stories because we have politicians exploiting the differences in people to make them react that way to each other. And I'm not saying that's all that's happening. I've seen white on white, black on white situations here too. But the climate we're in seems to exasperate this sort of thing happening. And just like how we said in the video, that the conflict sort of devolved into like a race war type thing. I don't know, man. We got to do better. We have to do better. This is just ridiculous. You know what I mean? We got to stop looking at people. If the economy is bad, it's not because of one group or the other. The economy is bad. Well, if I say one group, it will be rich, the greedy rich. And people might disagree with me, you know what I mean? I work a simple job, very few hours most of the time. Record profits for companies that are cutting hours. Big bonuses for managers so that they could keep the workers where they are. The unions, think of the past, people. They're busting them up all over the place, you know what I'm saying? So there's no protection. And if the workers say, well, what is the government doing to help us? Oh, don't do that. It's communism. I hear that so many times. If the government gets involved, it's communism. Well, if the unions are getting busted up and the government ain't doing nothing, who's watching the workers? That's where we heading fast in this year times and thing, you know what I mean? But anyway, I'm gonna leave a link in the description for this video. You all go check it out, the thing, and I'm gonna also put up a part 1 so you could go watch that after you watch this, or watch that and come back to this one and thing. All right. Hope you guys have a good day going on over there. You all take care of each other. Main point, no matter who you are, take care of each other. Cool runnings.